Hello, 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 Mr. DZ here. Lesson 5 in our basics series. Today we're talking about whether something's independent or not. And as you know, something is independent if it can be by itself. That's what it means to be independent. If it can be by itself. All right, so, and really what this comes down to is it a complete thought? That's what you're trying to figure out. Is it a complete thought? And there's a little caveat here because a complete thought does not mean you have all the information. You can have a complete thought without all the information. We'll get into that in a moment. Check these out. These are all clauses. And remember, the difference between a clause and a phrase is a clause must have a subject and a verb. A phrase can't have a subject and a verb. It can be a subject, it can be a verb, it could be neither, but it definitely cannot be both. So the team scored a lot. Team is subject, scored verb. If the horse runs too fast, horse runs. The old man dusted, unless the taxes are paid. Subject, verbs, all the way down. Now, some of these are dependent and some of these are independent. And you know which one is which. And you know which one is which because the ones that are dependent leave your mind kind of like in an open loop, as I call it. It's an open loop. Like your mind wants to close it. Like if you say, if the horse runs too fast, that's a dependent clause. Because your mind's going, if what? If what? Unless the taxes are paid off in full. Unless what? Then what? Your mind's wanting more information. That's what makes it dependent. And so that's what it really comes down to if it's dependent or not. Is it a complete thought? If it is a complete thought, then it's an independent clause. For example, the family drove to the library. Dependent clause. Or independent clause. Now, well, I was saying a moment ago, you may not have all the information. You don't know what kind of car they're driving. You don't know how many people are in the family. You don't know what city they're in. You don't know what the weather's like. There's a lot of information you don't have, but that doesn't mean it's not a complete thought. In other words, that doesn't stop it from being a complete thought. If it's not a complete thought, then it's a dependent clause. If the family drove to the library. Well, if what? If what? You kind of want some kind of information about it. And so basically there's two ways to be dependent. The first way is that it starts with a word that leaves your mind waiting for more information. These are called subordinating conjunctions. So this is unless, because, if, until, these kinds of words. They leave your mind waiting for more information. So that's one way it can be dependent. And the other way that it can be dependent is that it starts with a question word, but there is no question mark. So you can start a complete thought with a question word like what, as long as that sentence ends with a question mark. But if it doesn't, if it ends with a period, then that is not a complete thought. So who, where, what, why, how, and that. I know that that is not a question word, but I figure 2 categories is better than 3, and then we can just stick that in there. So what a lot of my students do is they get confused. They say if a sentence says like he runs to the park, they say, well, that's incomplete information. And again, yeah, that is incomplete information, but it's not an incomplete thought. You're not going to know everything. So a pronoun starting a sentence doesn't make it an incomplete thought. It just means you don't have all the information. And here's the lesson about life. You never will have all the information. You're never going to have all the information. Not going to happen. So you do the best you can.